Matt here again, and this is big. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the reason I bought a PS3. Well, that and the fact Sony sent the console to Weight Watchers on a discount. Heavy Rain was supposed to be the ultimate experimental combination of game and cinema. As a gaming and film fan, this game was supposed to be a dream come true. And then I remembered why I shouldn't set such high expectations. In case you don't troll the internets and read gaming publications which practically crowned this game before it released, Heavy Rain is a unique project in which a player follows 4 characters that all share something in common, a connection to the Origami Killer. What makes Heavy Rain different from most games is a distinctive style of gameplay, which focuses primarily on time button presses and stick movements that doesn't allow the player to fail. In other words, if the player misses a prompt, the game will work around this and change the story accordingly. Well, it's also different because, as far as recent memory and Wikipedia serves me, it's the first pure adventure game since Indigo Prophecy in 2005. Those damn hipsters and their fancy shooters. Anyway, Heavy Rain boasts itself as more of an interactive story rather than a game, which is good. Anybody to play Heavy Rain will tell you the strongest part of it is its story. Because the game doesn't punish you with a game over screen every time you forget to pick up the controller during a sequence, which actually happened to me on more than one occasion, the story has many branching off points. With the heavily emotional and gripping murder mystery, Heavy Rain gives the movie theater a run for its money. It has everything that you would expect from a first-rate big budget film: intrigue, emotion, great characterization, beautiful cinematography. And because the story can end in many different ways, replayability is just as strong. Some people suffer through lame narratives for great gameplay. Heavy Rain players will suffer through lame gameplay for a great story that could potentially differ with every playthrough. The only downside of the story is the hit or miss voice acting. You can tell some of these actors are foreign, not that there's anything wrong with that. The actual inclusion of gameplay hurts the shining story. Now don't get me wrong, I think a game primarily comprised of quick-time events could work, but Heavy Rain just doesn't seem to fit the bill. Just the presence of quick-time prompts cheapens the cinematic quality that Heavy Rain tries so hard to achieve. Indigo Prophecy took careful consideration to separate input prompts from the action. Heavy Rain just slaps it on the screen. Sometimes it works, but sometimes the prompts just taint the screen, ruining a great piece of cinematography. High-action fight scenes serves this method of input well, as it makes sense to place the attention points on screen for the character to react to. But when I'm comforting a father who is going through the most difficult trials to save his only living son, a big triangle and arrow takes away from the emotional pull. Plus, I don't need a quick-time event to make eggs. I can't tell when they're done cooking in PS3 world. There are also problems going between cinematic scenes and player-controlled walking sequence. Come on, guys. These walking animations are terrible. These guys swing their arms more than those f***ing kids that follow Barney the dinosaur around. Conversations also affect the impact from player input. With dialogue, one of the most important things to keep in mind is pacing. By giving the player the time to consider and react at their leisure, pacing is ultimately slowed down, potentially ruining the rhythm of the conversation, which will pull the player out of the story. In the end, I don't feel playing this game added anything to what the story brought to the table. Sure, I participated, but it never really adds anything to the experience. Simply, I would rather watch Heavy Rain as a professional production. Okay, so story is good, gameplay is bad. Surely the graphics are good, right? Well, kind of. The protagonists have great character models, of course, but others look iffy. And what is up with this kid? He's looked like he's been through 30 years of chemo and he can't be older than 11. These graphics are just way too inconsistent. Lip dubbing doesn't always match up. Hand movements have never been perfect, but Heavy Rain shows no improvement in the video game industry, which wouldn't hurt other games, but Heavy Rain is a game that needs to look good, being as cinematic as it is. Okay guys, slightly above average graphics, great story, block and trolls. This equals a pretty decent game, right? I wish. Heavy Rain is riddled with bugs and glitches. If it's a glitch that's happened in any game, I've encountered it in my first playthrough. Screen tearing, texture popping, characters randomly disappearing, sound cuts, even complete crashes. For a project that's been in the works for so long, this is just unacceptable. I hate to say this, but the glitches almost ruined the game for me. Heavy Rain is supposed to be a cinematic experience. If a movie is audio cutting out or actors randomly disappearing, etc., movie critics would shun it faster than shitty movies of the Battlefield Earth caliber. Heavy Rain could have been great, but the controls didn't add up. After that, Heavy Rain could have been good, but glitches tainted it further. So let's run this down. Story gets a 9.5. If you're at all interested in a good story, you might be able to look past the rest of the game's flaws. Design gets a 7.0. Inconsistent character models and awkward movement plague the cinematic experience. Gameplay gets a 6.0. The quick time events work, but take away from what the game is really about. Presentation gets a 3.5. No game this dependent on cutscenes should be this buggy. Replay value gets an 8.0. Seeing the different endings to a stellar story is worth wading through what ends up being mediocre. Overall, Heavy Rain gets a 7.0. If you're planning on weathering the storm of Heavy Rain, prepare yourself and bring an umbrella. It is truly a unique experience that story lovers should look into, but don't set your expectations too high like I did.